There is a myth that is out there that some children cannot learn. And you'd be amazed how many people believe that myth. Affluent, wealthy people buy into it because they think that school systems can only work for kids like theirs. Sometimes low-income people buy into it. Sometimes politicians buy into it, people who craft policy. And we lock ourselves into this mindset that education is somehow not available for all children, or that it doesn't somehow work the same way for all kids. I want to give you two powerful counterexamples to that point. I have a colleague named Elijah Cummings who represents a significant chunk of Baltimore in the United States Congress. He is the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, one of the great orators in the U.S. Congress. Both of his parents were preachers, so the preaching part comes to him naturally. He's now the chairman of one of the subcommittees on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the House. Very able, skilled member of the House of Representatives. First in his class at Howard Law School. Exceptionally well undergrad. The most interesting thing about him is nothing that I've said, but it's this. Until 7th grade, he was in special education. And Elijah's 53 now. That means that he spent that period of time between 8 and 12 in special ed classes, sat up with low expectations, and very few people who knew him or taught him would have envisioned that he would become a U.S. congressman, much less the kind of congressman that he is. Rose Sanders and I know someone else, David Wilson. David Wilson, until last year, was the vice president for outreach at Auburn University. He is now the chancellor of the external college system in Wisconsin. That means that all the University of Wisconsin branches outside Madison, David Wilson's the chancellor of all of those. A real up-and-comer in the academic world. Again, that's not the most interesting thing about him. Until David Wilson was 13 years of age, he did not attend school. He was born in Sweetwater, Alabama, or actually a little town that's even smaller than Sweetwater, on the edge of Sweetwater. And he was the youngest of 8. And because they were so poor, they literally didn't have the clothes to send him to school in a way that they felt that it would be a valuable, worthwhile experience for him. Finally, at the age of 13, he starts going to school. Fast forward so many years later, he's got an undergrad degree, a master's, a PhD, and a lot of people believe if either Auburn University or the University of Alabama ever has a black president in our lifetime, it's going to be this guy. So what I want to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all of the numbers, you've heard all the philosophic constructs around this issue today. What I want to say to you on a very practical level, if Elijah Cummings can go from special ed to being one of the great orators in the U.S. Congress, if David Wilson can go from no schooling at all to being chancellor of a college system, don't tell me that any child cannot learn if you find the right mix of good teaching, committed communities, and yes, if you put the right resources on the table. I firmly believe that. And it's interesting to me, and I don't want to give you a long, drawn-out analysis of this, but it's interesting to me. We have got to tell more of these success stories, ladies and gentlemen, about how you make public education work for all kinds of children. And anytime somebody tells me you can't do it, I think it speaks to the fact that their imagination is not strong enough and the fact that they can't do it. So the second thing that I want to say today this is a room full of teachers. All of you have made the choice in your careers and your lives that you will forego money, you will forego some of the, that doesn't mean it has to be a vow of poverty, by the way, but a lot of you have made that choice that you will forego other career choices that you've made to do one of the noblest things you can do on God's earth, and that's to teach somebody else a knowledge or a skill set. And I think we still struggle with this. For whatever reason, in whatever community you live in, we still undervalue teachers. We still don't put enough of a premium on what you do day in and day out. And you have all of these theories out there. You have people who say, well, our teachers aren't succeeding because our schools aren't succeeding, and they ignore the core reality. Whatever you do between 8 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, in too many homes, that is undone between 3:30 and 11:30 at night. And a whole lot of communities, your role at best is to try to be a stopgap or a guardrail against all the pathologies that are lurking around all kinds of communities. It is not easy what you do, ladies and gentlemen. But I will say this much. The choice that you have made to teach is one of the most noble choices that you could possibly make. It is a vitally important form of public service. And I ask you to not lose sight of one fundamental thing about it. Those of you who teach in difficult systems where you have a lot of low-income kids, ladies and gentlemen, do not lose sight of the fact that when those young men and women look into your eyes, you are sometimes the only positive force that is there. Sometimes you're the only redemptive force in their lives. Sometimes you're the only force in their lives that can say you count and you matter and you're worth something. You all know the reality of what goes on in homes today. You all know that in so many homes, every problem we can conceive of in this room is brought to bear on the shoulders of these kids. Brought home to roost on the shoulders of these kids. When you talk to them, the way you talk to them, whether you talk to them with respect and dignity, whether you treat them as the young adults they're about to be, it always amazes me, ladies and gentlemen, that any teacher anywhere in America would ever look at a child and say, you're stupid, you can't learn. That is the greatest sin against the profession that you occupy. And never lose sight of this, ladies and gentlemen. You know, a lot of you have already had this experience. You might be 50 years of age and you're at the gas station getting gas, and some guy walks up to you with gray hair and says, I know you don't remember me, but you taught me 25 years ago, and I was the kid who didn't want to stop talking on the third row, and so on and so on. These students, ladies and gentlemen, they always remember you. Don't lose sight of that. There are a bunch of them. There's only one of you at any given time. They will always have some kind of a memory of who you are and what you are in their lives. Your ability to lead and to shape them is so important. And you can look at all the statistics, you can look at all of the numbers, but that interaction between teacher and pupil is so vitally important in the lives of a lot of these children, ladies and gentlemen, and the battered lives of a lot of these children.